You're listening to the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast. Today's episode is an amazing interview with relationship expert Dana Nygaard. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast is your sanctuary for navigating these sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Welcome to today's episode. Today, I'm doing something totally different and something that I am so excited to share with you. This is the very first interview with someone else that I am sharing on this podcast that is not a member of my family, and it is with relationship expert and psychotherapist Dana Nygaard. Our conversation went to so many different places, but I feel like you are going to walk away from this podcast with some encouragement, with some knowledge, and hopefully with a sense of hope that your relationship with your in-laws does not need to be as stressful and contentious that it is right now, and that you have the power and the ability to make some changes. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy this interview with the Catholic psychotherapist, Dana Nygaard. There are women who are driven by insecurity, who settle for men who don't value them, only to suffer in silence in a loveless or downright abusive marriage. Dana Nygaard is a renowned psychotherapist, relationship coach, author, and national speaker who teaches single Catholic women how to date intentionally, stop settling, and start choosing wisely. She gives them the confidence and tools to know when a man is worth it and when to walk away. She also has a program for single women called Miss to Mrs. From Single to Sacramental, which blends cognitive behavioral therapy, attachment theory, and Catholic spirituality to help women build faith-centered relationships. She is the author of 365 Dates to Renew Your Christian Marriage, the Catholic edition, and the founder of the Cana Commandments Marriage Retreat. She equips individuals and couples with tools to foster resilient, joyful, and lasting relationships rooted in faith and love. That sounds awesome. Dana, welcome to my podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today.
So Dana and I connected in a group of other Catholic podcasters, and we just reached out and we thought, she's got some pretty helpful information. I think that you as my listeners would enjoy learning. So we're just going to jump right in, if that's okay.
That sounds great.
All right. So let's begin by thinking about unhealthy relationship patterns. And you deal a lot with Catholic women who are dating. What patterns do you see these women bringing from their dating lives into marriage that affect how they handle difficult relationships with their in-laws?
Well, one thing I've noticed is if there is trouble with what, at the time, the future in-laws, the way that relationship starts is probably going to be the way it's going to continue, because having that beautiful wedding ceremony doesn't suddenly change those people into angelic beings, right? We know that's not how it works, right? Nope. And so you have to know that what you have going into marriage is what you're probably going to wind up with. So if you're thinking, oh, it'll be better once we're married, that's simply not true. It's not true about your spouse, your intended, and it's not true about your future in-laws. And it really shows, I think, the character of a man. How will he handle that? Because you can marry a good man that has a really intrusive, mom and dad, right?
Yes.
As long as he has healthy boundaries. But if he is stuck in a man-child mode, one foot in each world, it's going to be really ugly and painful, and you're never going to be his priority ever.
Yes. Barring a miracle.
Exactly. And what's interesting, with miracles is God reaches down to us when we reach up to him, when we call him, right? But it always makes me think of that old, joke about, there's a flood and the guy's going to drown. So he gets on top of the roof
Yes.
and he's like, God save me. And the
Yes.
helicopter sent and all those things. And in the end, he drowns. He's like, why? And he's like, I thought God was going to save me. He sent you a boat. He sent you a
Yes.
helicopter, right? So we
Yes.
have to do what we can on our own. Then God fills in that gap for when we can't, when something is just beyond our control. But it's not
Yes.
beyond your control if you allow the person you're dating and going to marry to let his parents or her parents intrude into your lives in a really unhealthy, toxic way.
Yes. Yes. And that's I saw that when my husband and I were dating, but he did have lines that he would not allow them to cross. So there was a little bit of enmeshment,
Uh-huh.
maybe not a little bit. but but he did have that independence about him that said, okay, mom and dad, you're doing this, but she is the one I'm going to marry. I'm choosing her. So I
That's
think
right.
from that perspective, he did show me in the beginning that I was worth choosing above his parents.
I love that.
How that all played out.
It was not always easy. It was rather painful,
Right.
right?
Yes.
But it sounds like he had the ability to put in those boundaries. He just had to hone it, because when you come from an enmeshed family, as I did, it it's really hard to see because that's just your normal, right?
Yes.
It's only
Yes.
when you get out and about in the world, maybe as a teenager, maybe as a young adult, where you start to realize, huh, my parents aren't like the other parents,
Yes.
right? And so it's layers. It's not going to be overnight that they're just going to be like, super boundary person, because they
No.
grew up in a home where, number one, they didn't learn it. It wasn't taught.
Yes.
It wasn't modeled. And then when they practice it, let's say they hear what a friend says to maybe his intrusive parents, and the guy goes, okay, I'm going to say it to my parents. If the parents bring holy heck down on him, because they always want the person who's trying to break free, they want them to go back to homeostasis, which is
Yes.
their normal, right? So they
Yes.
will act worse. So that's what I always tell these couples. I say, okay, when you're setting boundaries, instead of coming back and being like, oh no, it got worse, Dana. I didn't think it could
Yeah.
get worse, but it could. I tell them, when it gets worse, if you're in front of them, don't show it on your face, but inside. And then later together, when y'all talk, be like, that was kind of funny. Is Dana a prophet in that way? No, I'm not no, that's not what I do. It's that's the pattern. So when they get worse, that's how you know you're doing it right. So instead of thinking, oh no, and freaking out, think, oh, it happened. Check.
Yes. Yes. My life was like that very much.
See, and we don't even
And
know each other. It's a
yeah,
pattern. It's a pattern.
it is. It is. And I've talked about that in other episodes about those patterns and how, like, to our husbands, it is. This is just how it is. This is how mom is. This is how life is. Yes, I have to tell her every single detail after every interaction, who was there, what time they got there, what time they left, what were they wearing, what were they eating, all these details. And and then it just kind of, when you start to put those boundaries in place, they don't just say, okay,
Never,
ever,
never, never.
never. And
Mm-mm.
they don't just kind of pout and then walk away, which, I mean, in certain respects, I could see, being upset about a certain boundary. But yeah, the pushing back
Oh,
even harder, next level,
yes.
totally blindsided by that. I
Yes.
was.
Going to the place where you think, like, your brain can't even comprehend it. And that's why people get so upset with themselves. They'll say, I'm like, how did I not see this coming? I thought it was bad enough, but that was like a 5. They went
Yes.
level like 10, 20.
Yes.
It's because you're not thinking in those awful, I'm going to call them evil ways, those manipulative
Yeah.
ways. That's not where
Yes.
your brain goes. So that's why you were so blinded by it, because you had no idea that people would do that. And then when they do it, it's astounding. And normally they do it in secret. In front of the world, they're
Yes.
typically, we just like butter wouldn't melt in our mouth. And we're just so sweet and kind. I just love that girl he married. Thank goodness he chose. That's not the truth, because they need the facade. And that's
Yes.
how you know it's not like, oh, that's just mom and, she can't help herself. No, it's a game to them. And they're not
Yeah.
seeing their child, or if it comes from both sides, they're not seeing, these people as independent. They're seeing them as objects. And we know from theology of the body, people aren't objects. We use
No.
objects. We don't use people. And they're using people for control. And the other side of it is breaking away from that enmeshment. It's so painful to realize I really thought my parent loved me all these years.
Yes.
And then it's, am I unlovable? So then you have to go through all of that. No, it's not
Yes.
that you're unlovable. They would have done it to me, to you, to Mother Teresa. They would have done it to anyone. It's
Yes.
them. But you're the first generation to break the generational, essentially, behavior curse, whatever you want to call it.
Yes. Yes. And it took me a long time to realize that. Now, my sister-in-law is very different than I am, but I think anybody who was willing to stand up to my in-laws could have been in my place, and they would have experienced the same thing. And so that was kind of, it was a revelation,
Mm-hmm.
and it was freeing to know that it's not about me personally. It's just whoever filled this spot, whoever got this ring, they were going to have these kind of issues.
That's right.
So,
And like you said,
yes.
that's very freeing, because if not, we tend to, because again, that's the way a normal person responds is, okay, did I
Right.
do something? I have to check myself. Do I need to go to confession? Do I need to get a spiritual director and get myself in alignment? Am I not receiving the fruits of the Spirit? So there is that examination of conscience. But when you come to the end of it and you're like, I know where I'm sinful and it's not this area,
Yes,
it is so freeing, because then you're not
it
trapped,
is.
because those are going to be, I think, demonic attacks, because demons, one way they enter are through wounds and traumas.
Yes. Yes. And these people cause a lot of wounds and
Exactly.
traumas.
And on
A
wound
lot.
upon wound upon wound, it's like the wound can't heal because they
Yes.
just keep adding on. And even if you think, well, they handled that better, that's simply breadcrumbing. It's
Yeah.
it's to put out those little crumbs so that you think, oh, well, this is safe. And you want to, go back over there like, okay, let me hug you now. Well, that way they can stick you again with
Yep.
another knife.
Yep.
So you have to
Yep.
be very, very cautious. It's
Yep. I feel
sad.
like you've been spying on me my entire
If only, that'd be so creepy.
Yes, you did.
Again, the
But
pattern. Yeah, it's
yes.
just, it's so predictable, and it's so bizarre because it's almost like they all read the same handbook, but there is no
Yes.
handbook. So that's why I think it is of there's a spiritual element to it, of ugliness, of
Yes.
sinfulness, of selfishness, of
Yes.
greed in many ways, right?
Yeah.
Greed over that person's
Jealousy. I mean,
yeah, the
ugh.
jealousy. And why would you not want your child to have someone that they can just give their all to? I mean, obviously, first fruits, everything goes to God, right? But why would you not want them to do that? Because that means you raised your child well. If they say, man, I love my wife so much, I protect her. Oh, now we
Yeah.
have children, I protect them. Why wouldn't you be glad? But see, they want the children, even though they're grown now, to be a mirror to them. They need the adulation. They need you're the best mom. And so they
Yeah.
project so much ugliness, but all the ugliness they're projecting is what they think about themselves.
Yeah.
So every mean thing they've ever said to you, if you think about it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, she's describing herself, or he's describing himself.
Yeah.
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 Psychology is fascinating. I
It
love it. I love it. It's so cool being a counselor.
is. It is. It is. It is. It's fascinating. Um, so we're talking about, having some boundaries, having that separation. How can the skills needed for healthy dating boundaries translate to setting boundaries with in-laws after a couple is married?
Mhm. So part of the pre-Cana, right, is discussing all the topics, how we're going to handle finances, how we're going to have children, where do we want to live, all those things. Part of it needs to be the parents. And I think part of
Mhm.
that comes from, what stories has your sweetheart told you? What have you shared with each other? Because there's going to be nuggets in there that's going to indicate, oh, okay, I can see what's coming ahead. And then also, how did they handle the future in-laws, the wedding planning process?
Oh,
Oh, right. Oh, I've heard stories where I refuse to wear, like, everyone's wearing a long dress. I refuse because that's not what really is good for my body shape. Okay, I once wore what was a dress called? The color was seafoam green.
I did too.
Girl, okay, we are kindred spirits. Maybe we're sisters. I don't know. Maybe there's an adoption. Let's do some DNA testing here, right? it's I looked terrible, and I remember looking in the mirror. And I was much
Yes.
younger when I really couldn't look terrible in many things, because when you're young, you look great in everything, right?
Yes.
And I remember looking in the mirror, and the hairdresser did a horrendous job. And I remember thinking, I look horrible. I look like I'm sick, and I'm going to be in
Yes.
family photos. And then I told myself, this is about your cousin. Slap a smile on your happy face and get out there. And that's what I did. So if you're the mother-in-law, if my future daughter-in-law tells me you're wearing seafoam green, girl, I'm wearing it. I'm wearing it, and I'm going to be happy in it, right? Because that's what you
Yes.
told me. So when they push back or they demand, I'm controlling, we are controlling as your future in-laws, the rehearsal dinner. You mean paying for it? Thank you. I would love, lilies or purple or no. We're what?
Yeah.
No, it shows you. So before you get married, y'all have to establish, how are you going to protect your domestic church? Right?
Yes.
Because one of the things that my husband said, and my husband is a very laid back, gentle soul with a steel core inside of him. Okay. He's a very strong man. He's just very chill, and he has an absolute servant's heart. And so he doesn't tell me things, right? He shares things. And honey, what do you think? Right. But he tells me, when we bought our home, when we were getting married, he points to the front door and he said, no one will enter through these doors that bring negativity and disrespect to our life. No one. Right? Oh my gosh. I will double marry you. If that's a thing, I'll triple marry you, right? You are so amazing, right? And
Wow.
it's true. So if anyone comes in and there's ugliness, you're going to be leaving through the same door very quickly. We're not going to spend an awkward 5 hours and later go, that was miserable. Because what he said is, this is our haven. This is our domestic church. Right?
Wow.
So those things have to be discussed up front. And if you're told things by your future spouse, like, that's just mom, or that's just my parents, that's like saying, oh, that's just John Doe, he beats women. Wait, what? Oh, that's just John, he beats women. Like, what? So anytime
Yeah.
someone says to you, that's just, that's a red flag right there.
Yes.
And then once you do get married, I think it's so healthy, and I think most therapists would agree with this. If it's your family, you're the one that has to deal with them up front. So you go tell your mother, and I'll go tell my mom or my mom and
Right.
dad, right? I think that's so important, because
Yes.
they're not going to forgive their in-law, like their daughter-in-law. They're not going to forgive
Yeah.
her. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
and the time she said, oh, we couldn't give the children chocolate before bedtime. What?
Yeah.
So it needs to be them holding the front, but y'all still being a solid unit. So when my husband has to stick up for us with his family, he tells them what we've discussed, but he's the one holding the front line. So they're not going to get a different story from me, or my husband's not telling me one thing and telling his parents, and his father, God
Yes.
rest his soul, has passed, or telling them something different. Yeah. And that's just as an
Yes.
example. Yeah.
Yes. No, that is so critical, because you're absolutely right. If I were to go and confront my in-laws about something, it would almost like confirm who they believe that I
Mm-hmm.
am,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm this, even though I never intentionally was mean and nasty,
Mm-hmm.
I was perceived as mean and nasty if I said something, just like even in passing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a whole different story to have their son come up to him and say, hey, don't treat my wife like this.
That's right. That's
no,
right.
you're not going to have the kids for a 2-week vacation without us. So it was,
No, that is not happening. And it's interesting because, okay, let's say they proceed what was, I'm sure, a normal boundary, right? Please don't give the children cigarettes. Okay, like whatever it was, right? And they're like, we will make them smoke. And they then want them for, okay, for example, the 2 weeks. I will have people say things to me like, but they're wonderful grandparents. If
Hmm,
they disrespect the mother or father of those children, they are not great at being
yes,
grandparents. So if I would not hang out with anyone who said disparaging things about my husband. Now, if they said, oh, we think he's a bank robber, here are the photos, I may have to take a second look and be like, okay, what? No, that did not happen, right? We'd live in an even bigger house, right, than we have right now. Excuse me. So, but it's that if someone disparages my husband, you don't get to be around our child because you're not
yes,
just going to tick a lock and be like, hey, that's between like me and your mom or me and your father. But with the kids, we just love on them. No, it's a bit like a divorce situation where, even though that person, you're not in their life anymore, you don't want to disparage them because that's half the child. So if you say,
right.
your daddy's a bum, you don't need to say that. You need to say your daddy's really good at math and you're really good at math, right?
Yeah,
Or, hey, grandkids, you know what? You clean up so nicely. I know your mother is so neat and tidy, and y'all have your mama in you in that way, like good, but they don't do that. So I
no,
wouldn't let anyone around my domestic church that's going to try to fracture us, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to fracture.
yes. And just to make it absolutely clear, in case you were listening and you kind of tuned out for a second, Dana said, if your in-laws are talking badly about you, but have this, what I'm going to call a facade of being good grandparents, that is not a good grandparent. A good grandparent does not put down, tell, lies about, slander, take jabs at their spouse, their child's spouse, and be good grandparents.
Exactly. They can't exist in the same world. That's like saying, like, he's a great cook, even though he's a wife beater, right? She is delightful. She's the best hostess and she's an embezzler. Wait, what? What? That doesn't mean I'm going to
Yeah.
go hang out with that person because
Yeah.
that is so destructive, right? And so I think people really it's so funny. People throw around the word narcissism all the time and
Mhm.
gaslighting all the time, and they don't always get them correct. Okay, what I hear people throwing around all the time is good. They're good
Mm.
grandparents.
Yeah.
She's a good No, just because they donate to a charity, that doesn't make them someone that is safe. Because it's almost like if they do some good things in the world, then I have to say yes to this. Or there's the
Right.
obligation because there's a lot of pressure from society. What do you mean you don't talk to your mom? What do you mean
Oh,
you don't
yes.
want to be with your in-laws? Like, what about you is wrong? Or if you just reach out to her and, just take her out to lunch. Hey, Marge, whatever her name is, Marge, come out to lunch. Oh, thank you for that sage wisdom. I had not tried lunch. No, because they're looking at the world in either one of two ways, either through the lens of they come from a quote unquote normal family who does normal
Yes.
things, or they are so enmeshed with their own family that the idea of anyone having boundaries freaks them out. Like, oh, I know
Yeah.
my mother-in-law isn't always nice to me, but I could never tell her she can't see the children. Lady, it's your job to protect them,
Yes.
right? That's your
Yes.
job. And for your husband to protect you, but also for you both to protect your marriage.
Yes. Yes. And I think about these examples, where I'm very honest with people and I'll say my in-laws have an impeccable resume.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
impeccable. You
Oh yeah.
cannot touch it. But that does not make them safe
Exactly.
for my family, for my marriage, for my sanity, for my kids. Good resume does not equal safe. And I think about When my husband and I were first married, we lived in Wichita, Kansas, and there was this serial killer called the BTK killer.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. And there were scores of interviews with people that went to his same church
Mhm,
and
mhm.
said he was just such a wonderful man, they just
Yeah,
couldn't imagine.
that's right. But
But
then
yet
look,
you don't want your, young 20-something-year-old daughter, sister, cousin going over to see him because she's not coming out.
exactly. So, okay, I think that is such a good thing that you shared there. So, I've changed my own language because I think language has such power. Okay.
Yes.
So, what I used to say and may occasionally say, but then I catch myself and I tweak it, I would say, okay, I just met John or Jane Doe. They're, he's so nice. She's so nice. I now say seems so nice
Mm,
because
yes.
I don't know. And there are four aspects to trust. And if a person doesn't have all four of them, then they don't need to know more than, hey, like I'm breathing.
Yes.
They don't need to know more than that. And it's amazing how all these people, like, John Wayne Gacy, right? He did the clown thing. It seemed friendly, fun, and look at what a evil doer he
Yeah.
was. So you can't always believe what you see. Now, if there
Mhm.
is a person who every story in their life, they are always the victim, always, and there are crazy people everywhere, okay, maybe there's something with you. But if not, the people you see smiling, they're not the same people that are behind closed doors.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, 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 1,000 times yes. Oh, so talking about, you know, um, a lot of women, not necessarily in my case, but I know that a lot of women feel like they're constantly trying to earn their in-laws' approval.
Yes.
How does this connect to patterns maybe that they developed when they were dating? Like trying to win, the future in-laws' approval, and then that just keeps going.
So part of it is they started off, pun intended, on the wrong foot
Mm, yeah.
by trying to win their approval because that already shows a sense of that they most likely have an insecurity and have an
Mhm.
insecure attachment to their own parents. That's the only reason why they would try so hard to get them to
Right.
like them. Instead, just be you. And they're either going to like it or they're not going to like it. So that's the first thing. So for anyone listening who, you're maybe just beginning in a dating relationship or, you're praying for your future, spouse and your marriage, just be you. That's all you need to be. But if you've gotten into that habit, then just know if they haven't already just jumped on board with you and been like, oh my gosh, you are the greatest thing to ever happen to our family. Praise God, you were born and are marrying into our family. Then it's probably never going to change. And so your
Yeah.
expectation is, well, if I make the right potato salad for the family reunion, right? If I do this, if I remember one year, and I was married before marrying my sweet David, annulled in the church. Praise God, got all that behind me. And I remember I put together a recipe book that included the recipes my little family enjoyed, and then all the family recipes because I thought, how
Oh,
cool would
wow.
that be, right? And I mean, yes, we had, Word and all that, but it was still a lot of work. It wasn't like I could
Yes, a
put it in
lot of
Chat
work.
GPT and be like, organize this and format it. I had to do it all. And then I went and had them all, printed and bound. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, they're going to have like their great grandmother's this recipe and Marie's, prune cake recipe. And I was like, oh, they'll be so touched. And
I
this is
want a
where,
copy.
thank you, thank you. It's now on Google Drive, and I will get you one. They the sister-in-laws opened it and the mother-in-law, and they all went, oh, and I had them boxed and wrapped beautifully and simply put them aside.
What?
that's when it hit me, because I had not started counseling then, and I wasn't a therapist then. That's when it hit me. I'm never going to be approved of. I'm never going to be acceptable into this North Dallas, richer I'm never like, these were their family recipes. I did it as a token
Wow.
of love. So when you're
Yes.
chasing an expectation, you're always going to be disappointed.
Wow.
Yeah, with people like that. With normal people, I know when I bought that, when we were talking before about my husband had a retina surgery recently, and we were talking before we got on camera, so recording that I'd bought him a beautiful piece of art about St. Lucy. I
Mhm.
knew his reaction. And sure enough, that was his reaction, because I know my husband, right? Because he loves me and he sees me through eyes of love. But if the
Right.
in-laws don't see you that way, you're just never going to get there. And shame on them for not seeing the love you have to give and offer. So give it where people want it. If not, you're just treading water and you're never going to get anywhere.
It's that casting your pearls before swine.
It is so true. And that's why the Bible is so wise. That's why Proverbs it all makes so much sense, because that's why sayings become sayings, because they're true.
Yes.
And it's true. Like, don't waste your energy. You right? Because relationships should be reciprocal, not tit for
Yes.
tat, but I go out of my way for you. And then a year later, I need something, you go out of your way for me. There's this beautiful ebb and flow. We had just taken a meal to a friend that had a shoulder surgery. And then next thing you know, we're getting a meal back when David has the retina surgery, right? Like, it's
Yes.
just, there's that reciprocity. And when you don't have that, you're never going to get it. So that way you won't be disappointed. So it's almost like what I said earlier, when they do the bad thing and you go, oh, and let me tell you about this one. This is a fun one. Okay. I created an imaginary drinking game. Okay. I'll have an occasional drink. I've never been drunk in my life. I think I would act like a fool, embarrass myself, and feel sick the next day. And I'm like, I'm awkward enough without alcohol. Okay. I don't do that.
Same.
So I never played those drinking games in college. A lot of people do. Right. So here's my
Right.
imaginary one. I know there's a one for the Friends show. And I think every time Joey says whatever his line is, like, yeah, or I don't know, he has some line he says, I don't remember what it is now, that it's like, oh, and everyone takes a drink. Okay.
Mhm.
So my imaginary drinking game is, every time an in-law says something offensive, you just look at your spouse and you just mouth like, one, that's one. And over here, this one does something, you go, that's two. And it's just because then you laugh at it like, there they go. If you're in a situation where you're going to be around them, because if not, the alternative is there's one. Oh, and then your sister, and then you get angrier. This way,
Yeah.
it's your inside joke. And at the end, you could be like, we'd be so drunk. There were 15. There were 15 different moments. And you can just laugh, because the devil wants you to get angry and upset and then scream at your children and go kick the dog. And
Yes.
again, he wants to destroy our families.
Yes, and I wish I had known that. I wish I had that idea, because I mean, playing that imaginary game, I would have been probably rushed to the ER
That's
'cause
right. That's right. You would have been blackout drunk, and they would have had to
Yes.
pump your stomach, which can
Yes.
show you the toxicity level. And it also is a fun way to gauge, just like at the doctor's office, they have those faces, from,
Yes.
right. And they're like, how bad is your pain? Oh, I'm a 6 or whatever. If you say, honey, last time it was 3, this time it's 4, and the next week it's 5. Okay, things are definitely heading in the wrong direction. Another
Yes.
thing that I was thinking of is based off of that idea, is that when I was giving that example, like, it was that you and your spouse would be in the same room. So if let's say you want to be around the rest of the family, but there's one person there that's so toxic, but you can't see the rest of the family if you don't see the toxic
Yes.
person. Okay, that can happen. Then a lot of couples will have an agreement. They don't leave each other's side. Literally, don't leave each other's side. And it's so
Yes.
funny. I have an aunt, great aunt, God rest her soul. She passed away, and I already knew I'd be seeing some really toxic family members at this room. But I love this great aunt very much. and wanted to show the rest of the family like my respect and, honor to her
Yes.
and her beautiful Christian life. And our agreement was we don't leave each other's side. Well,
Yeah.
at one point, David needed to use the men's room. Well, I can't follow him in public in a men's room. That's going to be creepy and I don't want to be arrested, right? And of course, that's the moment when
Oh,
one
yes.
that's when they strike, right?
Yes.
So try your best to not leave each other. Or what they'll do is they'll let, like if your spouse leaves the room, then they may say something to you, but then say, but don't tell your husband or don't tell your wife. And you're sitting here
Mhm.
like, you just said like his father or mother was a bank robber, was a
Yeah.
pervert. What? Because they're trying to, again, create fracture. And then you're stuck with, well, now what do I do? Here's the thing. You didn't agree to keep a secret. So if someone ever comes to you and says, hey, can I tell you something? I always say, I mean, not my therapy clients. That's a different confidential world, right? But in my own world, because I'll be like, what? In my own world, if someone says, can I tell you something private? I always say, I just need you to know I keep no secrets from my husband. So if a girlfriend
Mm.
tells me a story about how embarrassed she was because, God forbid her monthly cycle came early in public and she's wearing white pants, I'm not going to tell him that. That's
Right.
embarrassing, right? But there are no secrets. Like, oh, I'm having an affair. What? What? Because then I'm going to act weird around no, there's no
Yeah.
division in our marriage. It's not gossip. There's just no division, right?
Yeah.
So if they
I
come to
like that. There's no
division,
It's not gossip. There's no
that's
division.
right. We are one in Christ. We are one, right? And so if a man looked at me inappropriately at my age, that doesn't happen anymore. But when it did, I would say to him, "Hey, a guy hit on me today. Just letting you know." I was like, "Oh, thank you." Married. Okay, whatever. We tell each other those things. If we get a weird text, we show the phone, like, "I just want you to see this, and this I'm thinking
Yes.
about responding. Do you agree?" Okay, boom, boom, boom. Right? But you have to be solid. And why would someone say to you, but like, don't tell your spouse? If you don't
Yeah.
trust him, you don't trust me. I trust him with my life. That's the man
Yeah.
helping me get to heaven. So
Yeah.
then you don't need to tell, maybe you don't need to tell me then. So if they try to do that, kind of get you in the back to separate you, because then when your spouse comes, it's going to be like, hey, honey, it's going to be awkward. And he's going to be like, what's up? Nothing. Now you're lying to your spouse.
Yes. Yes.
And if that's not demonic, I don't know what is.
What I'm hearing through our whole conversation, and it's something that I know too well, is that these toxic people like to divide.
Yes.
They like to plant seeds
Mm-hmm.
of division.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's between you and your spouse, or you and your children, or you and the rest of the family,
Mm-hmm.
that's always fun. Uh,
Yeah. It
um,
spreads. It's like a cancer.
yes.
It spreads. Yeah. And I've actually had cancer. Okay. So I've had cancer twice, actually. It is like a cancer. It's actually no different than what happens when the body is attacked, because you are being attacked by these people and they're trying to spread this discord. Yeah.
And they do it so well,
Mm-hmm.
and they can
Mm-hmm.
do it with a straight face.
Yes.
And then you are just, in the situation where you said, don't tell
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
your spouse,
Yeah.
don't tell them. Then it's like, it's so sneaky because you don't, I think most of us on the surface would never think that that is an opportunity to divide our
Mm-hmm.
marriage,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not so blatant.
That's
It's
right.
very subtle.
Well,
Like, just don't.
if they're overt, just about you pull a stranger off the street and be like, hey, watch what's about to happen. They could be like, yeah, that person was setting you up. It's so obvious they're being hateful. Okay. Most of them, though, are covert.
Yes.
Oh, I was just saying in passing that I think she, aborted your what would have been your second child. I just thought I saw her outside an abortion. What? Or they
Yeah.
do the, very Southern thing. You and I are from the South. It's very Southern, like, bless her heart. The fact that she was in a mental institution, like, lady.
Pray for her.
Pray for her. God bless her heart, and that she's so ugly and unattractive. And he did date Melinda, that cheerleader, and she was so perky. And I saw her recently. She has not gained an ounce in 20 years. Oh, poor thing. I think I'll get her a Weight Watchers membership.
Yeah.
They do these manipulative things. So here is a great prayer that I learned from a very devout Catholic friend, and she learned it from an exorcist. I don't remember his name. It was a very long name, but I love it. Okay. Before he meets with anyone, it could be a parishioner, it could be, another religious, it could be his own siblings. Here's the prayer. I place the cross of Christ. So I picture like holding a crucifix in my hand. Okay. I place the cross of Christ between me and, put in the name, Jane Doe, or the people at the finance committee meeting, like whatever it is. 'Cause I think priests need a lot of protection, right? And then the
Yes.
second line is, and I pray that only good comes through it. And I pray that anything bad falls away, like it can't come through it. I love
Wow.
that, right? And then I like to end any kind of a deliverance protection prayer with, in the precious blood of Jesus. So if you are going to go someplace, and let's say, okay, Jane Doe is the one sister-in-law that tends to ruin things, but you love everyone else, and you don't want to not go to, the Easter event or the reunion, I would pray that prayer. But I would also pray it with the people you love. Because why would we ever want there to be discord between us? Like, we don't want anyone to be cranky. You need a snack and you're a little snarky. Okay. So I pray that prayer before every session I have with a client, before every time I get in my online group for single Catholic women, before I meet a girlfriend for lunch, I pray that prayer. And it's amazing what protection you can get from that.
Wow. Amen. Amen.
Mhm.
I want to ask one final question.
Sure.
I mean, I have a bajillion, but
We can talk after. We
we
can talk
can't have a 6-hour
week.
long
We'll
podcast.
talk.
I'm not Joe Rogan. So so for these women whose husbands don't see their parents' behavior as problematic, is there one small step that they can take to help shift his perspective without creating conflict?
There's a way that you can attempt to do that. So when
Right.
people come,
Obviously, we can't force it.
yes, because people, especially in therapy session, will often say, "What do I say, Dana, to make sure this happens?" Okay, right? There is no magic formula. People are people.
Right.
So I like the research by doctors Julie and John Gottman, Gottman. If people want to look them up, they are secular therapists. I mean, their heritage is they're Jewish, their personal faith, but it's a secular program. It's just so well researched. And so I like to infuse it with Catholic theology, because to me, it's the
Mhm.
best research program. But they teach something, and I'm trained in this method. It's what I use with my couples. They teach something called the gentle startup. And the idea is that the way you begin a conversation is most likely the way it will end. So if you come in harsh to your spouse,
Mm.
your mother's nuts, and she is hateful and hates me and wants to take the children and wants you to have married, Jennifer. Okay, whatever. Why would your spouse not feel defensive
Right.
or want to go into flight and take off, right? Or, well, yeah, but
Yes.
you're dad, and now okay, right? So the concept is to express your feelings first. So I feel, and let's say it's in general about the parents, I feel nervous and anxious.
Mhm.
And at that point, and I would always ask the spouse, I would invite them to a conversation, because we've all had someone come up to us, we're going about our business, and they jump in a topic, and we're like, wait, what? Like, my head cannot wrap around what you're talking about.
You changed
This
the
is
channel.
right. Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm going to start using that. Thank you for that. You change the channel. Like, I'm not prepared for that. So once they know, hey, sweetie, can we talk about something that's concerning me about your parents? Okay. So then you start off with, I feel. So you give them the feelings, and then you tell them what's the positive thing you need for them, meaning the thing you want them to do, not the knock it off thing, but what do you want them to do
Mhm.
in what situation? And you can flip those last two. So I could say, I'm anxious and distraught. Okay, I'll use those. Anxious and distraught. of thinking about Easter with your extended family, I need you, and it doesn't mean the spouse is going to agree, I need you to stay by my side the entire time. I need you to keep of Uncle Fred on that side of the swimming pool, whatever it is,
Yeah.
because then you're giving them an insight into what you want. Because what I've learned is so many people use a lot of words, but don't actually say concretely what they mean. And after 20 minutes, their spouse will finally be like, are you saying you want me just to keep Uncle Fred over there? Yes. Oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me that? So this method doesn't make them feel defensive, most likely. Now, the caveat to this is going to be if you, God forbid, married someone with a personality disorder,
Oh,
antisocial personality, narcissism, histrionic, okay, there's a list of them, then they're probably 99% of the time, they're not going to get what you say, and they're going to be argumentative. So
yeah.
that's one of those exceptions to the rule. But
Mhm.
in general, okay, then let's say your spouse, they want to push back. If they push back and they're like, I just don't get it. I think you're really sensitive. Mom says you are. And honey, that's what I see. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, you're so enmeshed. That's when you probably need an outside help, right? From a priest
Yes.
or I would go to a Catholic therapist, because they're going to understand we want our marriage to stay together
Yes.
and to not go through
Yes.
divorce like, I went through. Uh, and then if those things don't work, you just have to set your boundaries. Like,
Yes.
I'm not doing Christmas at your parents' house anymore.
Yes.
Um, it's not going to be allowed. Or I'm not going to be pulled between your mother demands we be there at noon, but my family thing doesn't end until 1. What? That's just us. There's no one else. Why can't it be a dinner for them? Well, but
Yes.
that's tradition, and so we're going to. But honey, so just I'm going to my mom and I'm taking the children. If you have to be that way, you may have to be that way.
Yeah. And it's not un-Catholic
No,
to
not at
do
all.
that.
Not at all. And it's actually charitable to not put this other person or people in situations where they're going to act out. So we have great neighbors, okay,
Yes.
but let's pretend we didn't have great neighbors. And if every time I stepped one toe onto a neighbor's property, they became enraged, they started cursing, throwing things. Why am I doing that when I know it's going to lead them to act unkindly and sinful? Then I'm
Yes.
helping them be sinful. Well, all I do is
Yes.
tell my sister, you could dress better. And then she flips out on me. Girl, why are you telling her those things? Like, close your mouth. No one asked your opinion, right? No one asked. And then I think that's it. And then, because sometimes even when you have evidence, some spouses, that they're still really enmeshed, will say, you just don't get her like I do.
Oh.
Yeah. But then that means your spouse isn't leaving and cleaving, which is so
Yes.
unbiblical, right?
Yes.
Saint Joseph didn't put up with people being jerks to his bride. Like
I
that
love
didn't
Saint
happen,
Joseph.
right?
Oh, yes.
He's so strong.
Yeah.
He would have never been like, oh, it's okay, you can go bash on Mary for a while.
Yeah.
Never, right? Saint
Yeah.
Joseph would not have allowed it. So we need to model ourselves after the Holy Family.
Yes. Amen. Wow. What a great way to wrap up this wonderful conversation. And I know that my listeners are just gonna be like typing in your name as fast as they can. Is she close to me? Can I get into her program? So do you have any parting words for us?
Yes. So marry well, don't settle.
Mm.
And if you do marry and then there are issues, get help sooner than later. Because
Yes.
the more ingrained these problems become, the harder it is to unpack and unwind them. So the sooner you get help, the better. And I would definitely want a Catholic therapist.
Yes.
And then I'd want someone who's really well vetted. So if you go to catholictherapist.com, I mean, I'm a member of them. It's not like I'm affiliate of the program necessarily promoting them, but all the therapists have to be vetted. We have to have a letter of good standing from our therapist. We have to agree with the different tenets of the Catholic faith, because not everyone who puts the name Catholic on their therapy practice actually follows the faith. So you want to make sure you have
Yeah.
someone that follows the faith. And there's also mycatholicdoctor.com. They do the same. Sorry.
Yes. No, I love my Catholic doctor. I
Yeah.
had not heard of Catholic. Is it Catholic therapists,
With an
plural
S.
or?
Yeah, plural.
Okay.
.com.
Very
It's
good.
really well done, and it's run by a therapist who priests kept asking her. I mean, she knew Mother Angelica.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just her story
Wow.
is incredible, and she finally realized we need like a clearinghouse for
Yeah.
this. And if a speaker, because when I speak around the country, I always have to have a letter of good standing from my fabulous pastor, Father Bradley at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Plano, or whatever priest before him.
Mhm.
But why would you not want that for the therapist?
Right.
Right? Because I will have clients come to me and say, I used to work with, whoever, Jane or John Doe, and they taught me this. And I'll be like, what? Okay, if one client says that, I think maybe you misunderstood them. But if client after client comes in and says, oh, yeah, they taught me about numerology, the Enneagram,
Mm.
I'm like,
Mm.
no, no, I'm never going to refer anyone to them.
Yeah, especially if you're already having issues, don't multiply them by choosing a poorly catechized, poorly trained therapist.
Yes,
Please
because
don't.
they're not going to understand the teaching of the church, and they typically will push divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want
Yeah.
that.
No. No. In spite of all the things that we've gone through, I'm glad. I mean, that was never entered our minds. Well, not my mind, because
Yeah.
I guess it made sense that I would be the one to leave. But yeah, I can't imagine being in the vulnerable position that I was in for so long, and somebody saying, you know what, it'd be
Yeah.
better if you just left.
Right.
And then what? And then what? And then my in-laws get unsupervised access to the children? I don't think so.
Exactly. But it's amazing some of the things that will come out of their mouth, or if there's a sexual problem, they'll bring up things outside of the faith to do. And it's like, no, we
Yeah.
don't know. We're not going to go into sin is not going to save our marriage.
No.
So let's not do that. Sin never saved a marriage. That should be a
No.
book or a t-shirt. I don't know.
Yes, or something to hang up on the wall. Who
There
knows?
you go. Remember this.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. Can you share with our listeners, where they can find you online and how they can reach out, and maybe where to find your book and all that kind of good stuff?
Yes, if you want the book, you can go to Amazon, or you can go to my website, Dana Nygaard, and Nygaard is Nygaard, Dana's Dana.com. And the reason why I mentioned Catholic edition, there's a Protestant edition. It is 99.9% identical. One question had to be swapped out. It was about the Pope, John Paul II. But the Catholic version does have an imprimatur, but it's for couples in mixed faith marriages where their spouse says, you're not bringing any of your Catholic stuff in this house. Yeah, and it's a date
Wow.
night book of questions. And so there's over 1,000 questions to get to deepen your emotional connection with your spouse. And that also came from my practice, from things I saw. I thought, this is what is needed. And I researched, there wasn't one, so now there is one. And it's also in Spanish. And then again, Dana
Oh, wow.
Nygaard, because I do speak around the country, and you can also get to my counseling website from there. But my passion project right now is the Miss to Mrs. program that you mentioned at the beginning, because too many women settle and then they're
Mhm.
heartbroken and they're miserable, or they're going to wind up going through a divorce, even if they don't want the divorce. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to help lower the divorce rate by teaching them up front. This is how we heal insecurity, so you can be secure. And this is what Catholic theology says about marriage. So when they do find their Mr. Right, that they know they're choosing well, and they know to not marry essentially a jerk. So if you're thinking, I don't know, am I insecure or secure? If you go to clarityplease.com, CLARITY please.com, there is a quiz I'll send you, and you can see if you have that issue or not, because that's why women marry poorly, is they have an insecure attachment to their own parents, and we have to heal that.
Wow. I love that. I love quizzes. I love doing these.
Anyone can sign up. You don't have to sign up just because, like, if you're single, you can still go and get the quiz. It's fascinating, but that has nothing to do with us. That's how our parents attach to us. And
Mm.
you can go, because God is such a good God, you can go from an insecure to secure attachment style because of something called neuroplasticity. so you can learn how to reparent yourself because your brain can heal. How do I know that?
Yes.
Every time now I take that quiz, and I probably take it every year or so. I think, okay, I'm going to go and take the quiz myself. I always score on the secure side. I used to be very, very insecure, but I didn't know it. I would have been like,
Wow.
no, I'm fine. Oh no, that's why I picked so poorly in the past. And now that's why I have my husband we've been married for over 15 years, dated for a year,
Wow.
engaged for a year, just life circumstances. And I've never been happier. And even my friends who are really happily married will still, his name's David, and they'll go, David. And they just smile and they're like, Dana. And I'm like, I know God is definitely making up for all I went through in the past.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I definitely want to get a copy of your book. Definitely going to check out clarityplease.com and see because I like you said, psychology is fascinating and there's always more to learn. And there's always something that we can do to improve ourselves, improve our relationships. So thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your knowledge and your heart to the podcast today. And I am just so grateful for this conversation, and I'm sure the listeners will be too. Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast. I have a free gift for you that I would love for you to get. It is my free scripts for toxic in-laws. It's a little PDF that you can use to give you some examples of how to speak to your in-laws about certain issues. I'd love to give it to you absolutely free. So if you head to desiringpeace.com/gift, it will be there waiting for you. Just enter your name and email so you can start using it for inspiration on how to talk with your toxic in-laws. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. Go to desiringpeace.com/gift to claim your gift now. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.